Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do one more of these before bed, but in the previous video, we showed how server RPCs work, and I tried to give a decent explanation on how the other types work, such as the client RPC and a big focus on multicasts and on-rep events. So currently, the way we have it, we're using a server RPC to go from the client to the server like so. However, as you can see, when the client shoots, 2 projectiles are spawning, so that's something we're going to have to fix in the future. But we're going to go ahead and move on to something simpler, and that is playing sound on other clients. So the way we can mute this is go to our volume mixer. Okay, maybe I cannot do it that way. I'm trying to think of what would be a good way to do sound. I could set this up and launch outside the editor. So, okay, well for now, you're just going to have to take my word for it. We'll go with that. So what we're going to do is whenever we shoot, we're going to play the sound on just all clients. So we're going to use a multicast for that to kind of show you what multicasts do. If I head over here to our header file, here we have our server RPC that fires projectile. Well, we also want to go ahead and have a multicast that plays sound whenever we shoot. So that sound will be played on all clients where our character is relevant. Like I said in the previous one, we'll get into relevancy later. So for now, oops, I forgot to change this back to server. So what we're going to do is ufunction at multicast. We're going to make it reliable. And I'm trying to think. Yes, I think multicast need validation. So with validation. Now we're going to do void multi underscore on fire. We do not need any parameters. We're going to do bool multi underscore on fire underscore validate. And then finally, void multi underscore on fire underscore implementation. Let's go ahead and create our implementations for the validate and the implementation functions. Now I've already explained the validate, so for us we're just going to simply return true. Go ahead and start the compile. But what we're going to be doing is we can also fix our double spawning of the projectiles here too by doing some checks such as is locally controlled. So if we're locally controlled, don't spawn the projectile and that sort of thing. So we might do that in this video as well. So anyways, here in the on fire, we play the fire sound. Well, what we want to do is we want to play that on all clients. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this where we play sound and place them in our multi on fire implementation, like so. And I'm going to go ahead and in our server underscore on fire implementation, we're going to call our multicast function. So multi on fire, like so. And I'm going to go ahead and compile. Now, multicast functions, the reason we're not calling this directly from the client, so our on fire, actually we need to do one more thing first before I forget. I'm going to close the editor down. I'll keep explaining real quick. So the reason we're not calling it from the client, so for example, in here, replacing it with the server version, is the only way a net multicast can get called is if it is through the server. So the server always has authority. So you go from the server to all the clients, not from one client to the rest of the clients. So if you want to perform something on the client that happens on all the other clients via a net multicast, you have to go from the client to the server with a server RPC, like we do here or here. And then we have to go from the server to the multicast function, like we do here. You try to call a multicast function on the client, really nothing's going to end up happening for the most part. I think it'll run on the client who called it, but I don't I'm not sure if anything else will occur. Anyhow, we have to do one more thing. So currently in our onFire, we do a authority check. So if we do not have authority, we call server underscore onFire. So that means we're kind of like we're the client. We're going to make a call to the server. So the server can spawn the projectile. Well, if the server shoots, this is not going to run, and ultimately nothing's going to happen. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the editor real quick and show you, which I should have done initially. So I'm going to try to shoot on the server. So I shoot, sound and stuff gets played, but there's no projectile. So we need to do a different thing here. So we're going to do else. And here, this means we're on the server. So on the server. Here we are on the client. This up a little bit. So on the server, we need a way to do all this stuff. So first off, we want to go ahead and actually spawn the projectile, which we can do that directly inside of here, like so. And we're going to change location and rotation out to use spawn location and spawn rotation just like before, and use our world variable. So this will now spawn the projectile on the server. And then from there, since we're already on the server, we're going to do the kind of the exact same thing as we did on the client. And we're going to simply call our multicast. So right after we spawn the projectile, we're going to do multi underscore on fire and compile. So this will make it so if the server tries to shoot, everything inside of the else statement will run. So it's going to spawn the projectile like normal, and it's going to call the multicast function. But if the client tries to shoot, it's going to call the server RPC. The server RPC is then going to spawn the projectile and all that kind of stuff, and then it's going to call the multicast. So now I'm on the server. Everything's working as intended. Oops. I'm on the client. As you can hear, there's kind of a weird sound echo. That's because the sound is playing twice. That's due to our multicast. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually print out a log on our multicast right up here. So multi underscore on fire implementation has been called. And we should see this for each call get printed however many times there are players. So if there's 2 players, we're going to see this message get printed twice each time this function is called. So a better way to show what's going on is playing our animation. So we're going to copy our code that plays the animation. We're going to play it in the multicast. Let's go ahead and compile. I'm going to restart my editor. And now, whenever someone shoots, we should see the recoil animation get played. So here we are, I shoot. You can see on the server, the recoil animation is playing and vice versa. Now let's look and see how many times that multicast gets called. So in our log here at the bottom left, I shoot on the client. You can see server underscore on fire implementation has been called, and then our multicast gets called twice right below that. If I play with 3 clients, we should see it 3 times. So I shoot. As you can see, it gets called 3 times. So that's how our multicast works. So we can do some checks in here as well to prevent certain things, such as duplicate sounds being called. So right now, we're actually going to do this with our spawn actor because I think that'll be a better example. So we're going to take our spawn actor that's in our server RPC where we spawn the projectile. We're going to go ahead and copy it, paste it down into our multicast function, like so. And we're going to have to set up the location and rotation here in a second, but we're going to do this to spawn the projectile on the clients instead of doing one big spawn on the server, and then we can set our projectile to not replicate. And I'll show you why we're going to do that here in a second. So let's go ahead and set up our multicast function here. So it's going to take in two parameters, an f vector for location and an f rotator for rotation. So we're going to copy our server's RPC's parameters and paste them inside of our multicast in both the .cpp and .h, like so. Now when we go to call it, like we do on line 143 in our server RPC, we have to pass in location and rotation. So that way all the information gets sent to the multicast. So next up, we're going to make a slight change to ourself here. Well, let's also pass in spawn location and spawn rotation to our multi-on-fire call and our on-fire function. I'll go ahead and compile. And we're going to do a couple little things real quick once I launch the editor. And I'll try to explain and hopefully clear anything up that you're confused about, or you might be confused about. The first things first, we want to load up the projectile blueprint. So content browser, first person CPP, blueprints, first person projectile. We want to uncheck replicates so that it is not replicating. So for an idea on what, if we have this set to replicate, what it's going to do. If we have it set to replicate and we spawn this projectile class on the server, a copy will also be spawned on all the clients. If we do not have it set to replicate and the server spawns that projectile class, it will not work its way and spawn on all the other clients. And that's what we want for this example. So we have our multicast. So if we didn't have the multicast, our projectile right now should not spawn for other clients. So if I shoot, as you can see, it spawns one projectile. So we spawn it on the client and the server, just like so. However, we have the issue of it spawning twice because of how we have the server RPC set up with the multicast. So that's what we're going to correct. So we kind of just took our problem that we had before of the client spawning two copies and reversed it to the server. And we're going to do something similar to fix that as well. So in the very first video of this little 1.0 section, so video 1. I think I just called it 1. Yeah, I think I called it 1.0. I explained that for shooting, just like our movement, we want to go from the client to the server, but we want it to happen on the client instantly. So when we left click on the client, we want it to go ahead and shoot, play the effect, play the blood splatter, decrement our ammo, and all that stuff immediately. Because if we do it based on the server, so we go from the client to the server, and then the server changes all the stuff, maybe it's via a multicast or variable replication, which we'll get into later, then it is going to have some latency. So there's going to be some lag from when we left click to shoot to the time when we actually see the shot happen, the effects occur, our ammo decrement, and that kind of stuff. So we're going to kind of revert this on fire function back to how it was. So I'm going to go ahead and copy here where we spawn our projectile. Copy all this and paste it outside of our if statements. So that way it's going to spawn on both the client and the server no matter what, whenever they shoot. So when they shoot, it's going to have their own copy, and that's what I want. So then, starting from the client, if we're the client, we're going to tell the server, hey, I just tried to shoot. Here's my location and rotation of the barrel. Spawn the projectile for me and do whatever else you need to do. So we're going to move to the server. The server is then going to perform the multicast, which will tell all the other clients, including the server and the player who shot, that, okay, this player just tried to shoot. Here's the location and rotation of his barrel. Go ahead and spawn the projectile for yourselves because we're doing this on the clients while we're doing it locally. And yeah, go from there. So then on our multicast function, we spawn the projectile for everyone. We play the sound for everyone, play the animation for everyone. Well, that's great, except we don't want this stuff to run on the client who actually did the shooting. So for example, with this setup, if I shoot on the client, I'm not going to be able to tell it very easily, and you won't be able to see it right now, but if I shoot with the setup that we just had before, the one that just compiled, you can't see the changes yet. You should see two projectiles, which you don't right now. You will hear the sound play twice, which we do, and the fire animation would actually play twice as well. So, for example, actually better yet, now that it's compiled, I will just show you. So we should have two projectiles, two copies of the sound playing, and two of the animation. You won't be able to see or hear the sound very well, but as you can see, it spawned two projectiles. That's because it's running on the client. Immediately when we pull the trigger, we make the call to the server. The server performs a multicast. The multicast then spawns the projectile on all the clients, including the shooter. So to avoid that, we're going to wrap this in something. So we're going to do if is locally controlled. We're going to wrap that around everything that's inside of here. We don't want it to be if we're locally controlled. So we'll put the exclamation point before it. So if we are not locally controlled, run all of this. So what locally controlled is, if I am the shooter, well, if I am the owner, I am the player of this character, do not run this. So I'm the one that's controlling it. I don't want this stuff to run. Well, it means if I'm controlling this character, I am locally controlled. So now, here's I'm on the client, and I shoot the wall again. As you can see, only one projectile comes out. And we're not hearing the duplicate sound or anything like that, so that weird sound issue that we were having. We're just having one projectile. And it still will fire on the server. Like so. It's because it's every single client, including the server, has their own copy. And we are not running all of this code on the shooter's machine at all either. We're only running what's highlighted right now, such as spawning the actor, playing the sound, and the animation, on the other client because of this check. So this check pretty much says, hey, I was the shooter, so I already spawned my projectile when I shot, I already played the sound, I already played my effects, the animations, all that kind of stuff. I don't want to do it again, so it's just going to be false and not run all of this code for a second time. However, if we are the other client, so we are not the shooter, and this function runs, it'll say, hey, I am not controlling this character. Somebody else is. So this is going to return, this little statement right here will be true because we are not locally controlled, so this condition returns true, meaning, okay, I am not controlling this character, but you just told me that he shot via this multicast function. So I'm going to go ahead and spawn the projectile. I'm going to go ahead and play the sound for his firearm, and I'm going to go and play his effects and his animation for the recoil and that kind of stuff. So that's how like all these kind of checking if we have authority, performing the multicast, checking if we're locally controlled, that's how all this stuff ties together. So everything for the most part has a purpose here and it works together. So you can, like they say, like there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. Well, there's a lot of ways that you can accomplish the exact same thing that we did over, you know, over the network. So we don't necessarily have to use a multicast. We could do this with an on-rep, which is something that I do want to go over possibly either in the next video or, yeah, we'll probably actually do that in the next video. So we could use an on-rep to do this exact same thing. And that on-rep, honestly, will probably do it a little bit easier, in my opinion. However, this gives a good example of the server and the multicast RPCs and how they get set up and called. So next up, what we're doing, we understand the entire client side, but what happens when the server goes to shoot? Well, the same thing should happen because if I play on the server, there's only one projectile and one copy of the sound. Well, we're doing the exact same thing. Even though we were on the server, we're still controlling that character. So is locally controlled is going to return true. So this statement is going to fail, and this code here is not going to run. It's the exact same thing. So hopefully this was a pretty good explanation. I tried to give an example the best I could about, this kind of stuff, and I thought this was a good one. Um, for the next video, we will take everything we've done here and we will move on to a replicated variable. So we will be learning about variable replication and we'll be setting it up, that variable, to be working with an on rep. So whenever to sum it up, with replicated variables, the only way that variable can really change, so like whoever has authority over that variable, well, the person who has the authority over the variable is the server. So let's say we have a replicated variable, the client changes, that has the value of 5, and the client changes that variable to 150. Well, the server is still going to have that variable set to 5. Then let's say the server decides to change that variable down to 4. Well, because the variable is replicated, that client's variable has automatically changed itself to 4 to match the server. So when you take that concept and you make that variable an on-rep, so on-rep, think of it like on replication. So when the variable gets replicated down to the client, like I just said, it went from 150 to 4 because the client changed it to 4. I mean, because the server changed it to 4 and it got replicated to the client. So the client went from 150 to 4. I think I just kind of, hopefully that I didn't screw that explanation up. But when that replication occurs, we can set it up so a function runs as well. So whenever that variable on the client went from 150 down to just right to 4, that function can run. So when we shoot, we can have like a little integer, like a shot counter. So every time we shoot, that variable gets increased. We can shoot, and on the server, we'll do the same thing. We'll make the call from the client to the server. The server will then increment that shot counter variable. And then because we have that set up with an on rep, whenever that variable gets replicated to other clients, it will call the function that will essentially just have this logic inside of it. And that's it. It'll be handled automatically. And there's also conditions for the replication. And we will be getting to those in that video as well. I'm going to try to give a better explanation in the next video when we actually go about doing it, but that was to just kind of sum it up. And I'm hoping that kind of made some sense. But this video is probably pretty long. Yeah, 25 minutes, just like the rest of them. I'm spending a lot of time recording these. Good grief. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and end it here. And like I said, in the next video, we're going to be taking this stuff and we'll be making it work with an onRep function, with onRep. So, and replicated variables. So we'll be just slowly starting to get into those. So anyways, if you like what I'm doing and you want to help support me, you can find a link to my Patreon below in the description. And if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to hop in my Discord server that is also linked below and ask away. I will try to answer any questions you have the best I can, and if I can't, someone else probably will. Anyways, I will see you in the next video. Have a good one.